Jim Jordan speaks with confidence, raising his tone just enough to project authority. Let's stop pretending, he begins. Some of us came here to govern, others came here to grandstand. He glances toward Jasmine Crockett. And frankly, Congresswoman Crockett, I'm tired of your slogans. I'm tired of the theatrics. You take complex financial structures and reduce them to hashtags and outrage. You're not here to build anything. You're here to perform. He continues, sharpening his words. This hearing is about a $19 million federal grant, serious money, and yet you've consistently misrepresented the facts. You call it corruption, but you don't even grasp the funding mechanisms. You twist budget allocations into conspiracy. That's not oversight, it's noise. Jordan gestures toward the committee documents in front of him. We've got real work to do here. The public expects analysis, not applause lines. And you, Congresswoman, seem more concerned with going viral than getting results. He narrows in. When was the last time you introduced meaningful legislation? When was the last time you sat with appropriators to understand where the money goes? A final jab. This isn't social media. This is Congress. And no matter how many followers you gain, it won't make up for a lack of competence. You're out of your depth. Jasmine Crockett waits for Jordan to finish, not reacting to the tone or the provocation. When he sits down, she adjusts her microphone, speaks clearly and without raising her voice. Congressman Jordan, you've spoken for several minutes without saying anything that resembles accountability. You've used your time to insult me personally, not to clarify the financial questions in front of us. She pauses, keeping her tone measured. You keep mentioning social media. That's not governance either. The irony is that while you're accusing me of chasing headlines, you haven't provided a single fact about the $19 million in question. I've reviewed the documents, I've followed the paper trail, and I didn't come here to play your game. She leans slightly forward. You claim I'm not qualified to speak on this, but unlike you, I didn't vote to approve the initial funding and then act shocked when it didn't benefit your donors. I've read the allocation memos. I know which companies were prioritized. I know who signed the waivers. She looks straight ahead. This committee isn't a stage for either of us, but if you'd prefer to debate personal credibility, I can continue. Or we can go back to the $19 million and actually ask where it went. Jasmine continues, this time with more emphasis but still calm. 3 years ago, I represented a family who lost everything due to a faulty federal housing grant. No media, no cameras, no outrage, just a mother and her 2 kids evicted due to an administrative error made by a contractor who was never held accountable. She pauses. I remember reading that file line by line. I remember what it felt like to tell that woman there was nothing more I could do. That's why I came here. Not to be liked, not to be followed, but to make sure no one ends up forgotten again. Then she draws the connection. The $19 million we're discussing is just another version of that same failure. Redirected funds, untracked vendors, no clear oversight. The language in the approval memo was written to be vague, and the only people who benefited were private contractors tied to political donors. She speaks deliberately now. This is not about theater. This is about accountability. And if that makes some of you uncomfortable, then maybe it's time to ask why. Jim Jordan lifts his pen and taps it on the table before responding, clearly annoyed by the shift in tone. Oh, here we go again, he says. The emotional testimony, the tragic story. You always find a way to bring in a sob story that tugs at heartstrings but doesn't answer the question. He gestures dismissively with one hand. We're not here for personal experiences. We're here for numbers, policy, and law. And instead of addressing the inconsistencies in your claims, you give us another performance. He turns slightly to address the committee. Let's remember what this hearing is actually about. Oversight. And the Congresswoman wants us to believe that she has the authority to question financial integrity when she's done nothing but throw accusations without evidence. Then back to Jasmine. You want to talk about a paper trail? Show it. You want to question contracts? Provide the proof. What you're doing is trying to redirect this entire hearing into a platform for moral posturing. And frankly, the American people deserve better. His voice sharpens toward the end. You were elected to legislate, not lecture. So if you have evidence, present it. If not, stop wasting this committee's time with speeches. Jasmine Crockett doesn't respond immediately. She takes a second to adjust her notes, opens a folder, and speaks with precision. You asked for proof. I'll start with this. On June 4th, 2023, a $4.7 million portion of that federal allocation was awarded to a logistics contractor based in Columbus, Ohio. That company, Tri-River Freight, has no prior federal contract history. None. She looks up briefly. 3 months before that award, Tri-River Freight received a $250,000 consulting donation from a PAC chaired by your former chief of staff. She pauses, lets it hang for a moment. That donation was never disclosed during the committee's funding review. There's no record of vetting, no performance record, no open bids. It went straight from proposal to funding. She continues without raising her voice. You can call it a coincidence, or you can admit what it looks like. A handoff. One that benefited someone close to you, and now you sit here and accuse me of wasting the committee's time. Jasmine closes the folder, but keeps her hand on it. We're not talking about theoretical money. This isn't about Twitter. This is $4 $7 million that went to a firm with no track record and clear political ties, and you're going to answer for it. Jasmine opens the folder fully now and slides out a printed exhibit. She holds it up and begins reading. This is the award summary document signed by the Subcommittee on Infrastructure Oversight, dated May 29, 2023. It lists the approved recipients of the $19 million disbursement line by line. Entry number 6, Tri-River Freight, awarded $4.7 million for emergency logistics coordination. She glances toward Jordan briefly, but continues without interruption. Nowhere in this file is there documentation of bids, risk assessments, or qualifying metrics. In fact, there's a handwritten note in the margin that says, Expedite, recommendation from Rep. J. She places the exhibit face up on the desk. I've confirmed with committee staff that Rep. J. refers to you, Congressman Jordan. You intervened in this allocation directly and omitted that disclosure from your public statements. That is a violation of standard oversight procedure. She pauses only to shift tone, not volume. You questioned whether I've read the documents. I've read everyone. I didn't tweet about this. I tracked it, documented it, and waited for the moment you would challenge me on credibility. Then the final hit. This isn't personal. This is procedure. You broke it. You concealed it, and I'm not the one who should be answering questions right now. Jim Jordan cuts in sharply before Jasmine finishes her last sentence. That's not what that note means, he stammers. You're taking internal shorthand and twisting it into something it's not. Everyone here knows these documents go through layers of staff and edits. You're weaponizing a margin comment like it's a signed confession. His tone is no longer commanding. It's rushed. You're implying corruption based on a document that wasn't even finalized when the allocations were discussed. That memo was part of a draft cycle. It wasn't binding. It wasn't public record. You don't have the context. Jasmine doesn't respond. She watches silently as Jordan continues trying to reframe the situation. You want to accuse me of misconduct, then do it with actual evidence. Don't hide behind a sticky note and expect it to hold up. That's not how oversight works, Congresswoman. He looks around the room, hoping to rally support. And by the way, I'm not the only one who recommended fast-tracking that funding. Ask anyone on the subcommittee. Ask the clerks. This was bipartisan. You're cherry-picking. He fumbles with the papers in front of him, flipping through them without reading. His voice lifts again. I've been on this committee for years. I don't need to defend myself against innuendo and theatrics. But the words no longer land with force. The urgency in his tone now sounds like retreat. Jasmine waits until Jordan stops speaking. She doesn't acknowledge the shouting. Instead, she pulls out a second document and places it flat on the table. This is the finalized memo, dated June 2nd, signed by 3 subcommittee clerks, 2 of whom confirmed to my office that no edits were made after May 30th. The note you just called a draft comment is on the final version. She taps the line with her finger. Expedite. Recommendation from Rep. JJ remains, without redaction or clarification. It wasn't removed. It wasn't flagged. It's part of the final submission to the allocation board. She looks directly at Jordan. On June 6th, Tri-River Freight received its first wire transfer, $2.35 million, routed through a pre-cleared disbursement channel marked for urgent services. I've reviewed that routing file, I've confirmed the dates, and I have the signature of the committee chair verifying the approval. She lifts her eyes and speaks slowly. I'm not speculating. I'm not theorizing. I'm presenting verified procedural documents, signed, dated, and submitted under your oversight. Then, without changing tone, Congressman, if you're going to claim that this was bipartisan, then provide bipartisan records. Otherwise, what we're looking at is a direct line from your recommendation to a company with no federal track record and a financial relationship to your inner circle. Jim Jordan exhales sharply and shifts in his chair. He no longer tries to project authority. Now he's searching for a way out. Okay, enough of the theatrics, he mutters. There's nothing illegal in making a recommendation. We all do it. Members advocate for projects in their districts all the time. That's not news. That's normal. He lifts another stack of papers but doesn't read from them. This hearing wasn't called to investigate individual allocations. It was called to assess overall budget performance. You've derailed the entire session based on one vendor, one note, one assumption. He points vaguely toward Jasmine's desk. You're building a narrative off of loose threads, and while it might sound good in a speech, it's not how oversight committees operate. We look at systems, not political stunts. His voice tightens. If you think there's real misconduct, file a formal ethics complaint, but don't sit here pretending to conduct an audit with unvetted documents and insinuations. Then softer, trying to sound dismissive. This isn't law school. You don't win hearings with courtroom tricks. He lowers his eyes for a moment, rearranges his papers again, and falls silent. Not because he's finished, but because he's run out of ground to stand on. Jasmine reaches for one final sheet. A highlighted FEC disclosure form. She holds it up without theatrics, just facts. This is a donation record filed April 12, 2023, $250,000 to the Congressional Partnership PAC, listed under Entity Code 41C. She looks across the table. That PAC is chaired by Douglas Crane. Mr. Crane also serves as managing director of Tri-River Freight, the same company that received $4, $7 million in federal funding weeks later, without competitive bid, background clearance, or performance history. She places the form next to the allocation memo. There is now a documented timeline, a donation from a logistics firm's executive, routed through your affiliated PAC, followed by a fast-tracked contract awarded to that firm, recommended directly by you in writing, and omitted from public disclosures. Her voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. You said earlier that this isn't law school. You're right, because in law school, this would already be considered a conflict of interest under Federal Ethics Code 2635.702. She takes her hands off the papers. If you have another explanation, this is the time. If not, then your silence will speak for itself. Jasmine finishes her statement and folds her hands in front of her. She doesn't look triumphant. She doesn't gloat. She waits. Across the room, Jim Jordan remains still. His fingers press against the edge of his stack of papers, but he doesn't reach for them. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't object. Seconds pass. When he finally speaks, his voice is low, stripped of its earlier force. I'll have my office issue a clarification, he says. If there's been any confusion about timelines or procedures, we'll address it. He doesn't raise his eyes, doesn't refute the donation, doesn't deny the recommendation, doesn't explain the memo. No motion, no counterargument, just a hollow attempt at procedural deflection. And a silence that confirms more than words ever could. Jasmine gives no follow-up. There's nothing more to add. She gave him the space to speak. He used it to retreat. Jasmine finishes her statement and folds her hands in front of her. She doesn't look triumphant. She doesn't gloat. She waits. Across the room, Jim Jordan remains still. His fingers press against the edge of his stack of papers, but he doesn't reach for them. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't object. Seconds pass. When he finally speaks, his voice is low, stripped of its earlier